She was a keen horsewoman, invalided by a fall in 1926. And while she convalesced, she began to write a novel. She called her heroine Pansy O'Hara, and she continued to write her book off and on for the next 10 years. She never expected it to be printed. But when a man from Macmillan came to town, she reluctantly let him see the manuscript. He said he wanted to publish it, but he didn't like the heroine's name, so together they decided on Scarlett.
Gone with the Wind was brought to my attention by Annie Laurie Williams, who represented Macmillan and Company for the sale of picture rights. So I read the book, and I just thought it was absolutely wonderful. And I worked, as we all know, for David Selznick, and I was responsible for calling to his attention important material. So I called it to his attention.
Val Luton was the Selznick story editor. So we sent him a copy of the book as soon as we'd gotten it. And he came rushing into Mr. Selznick's office. And he said to him, "Mr. Selznick, this is nothing but a piece of ponderous trash. You're going to make the biggest mistake of your life if you try to film it. It's impossible."
May 25th, 1936. To Kay Brown. Have gone over and carefully thought about Gone with the Wind. If we had under contract a woman ideally suited to the lead, I'd probably be more inclined to buy it than I am today. Most sorry to have to say no in face of your enthusiasm for this story.
So he said to me rather impolitely that to pay $50,000 for a book that the author of which nobody had ever heard of was crazy. And was I crazy? No, I said I wasn't crazy at all. He was the crazy one.
But Kay Brown now appealed to Jock Whitney.
And so Jock said, "All right, I'll buy it for you, Kay. We'll give it to Pioneer." So I said, "Okay, let's do that. We better tell Selznick, though." And so we told Selznick, and I'm sure that was the reason. He didn't want Pioneer to buy it, which was the other half of our company.
July 6, 1936. If you can close Gone with the Wind for $50,000, do so. Cannot see my way clear to paying more than $50,000.
Kay Brown closed the deal on July the 6th, the week the book was published. Selznick took a copy on vacation to Hawaii, where finally he read it and began to ponder the problems. How could 1,037 pages be reduced to a manageable movie? One thing was settled immediately. Selznick's friend, George Cukor, was selected as the director.
David Selznick and I looked a little like each other. We really weren't very proud of that, either of us. And once I said to Mrs. Selznick, "You know that David and I are constantly being mistaken for each other." And she said, "Oh, well, I don't think you look like each other." So I said, "My mother doesn't like it either."
Cukor had already made 5 films for David Selznick, including Bill of Divorcement, Dinner at 8, and David Copperfield. He was the first contract employee of Selznick International.
September 29th, 1936. I have just spoken to Cukor, and he shares my enthusiasm for Sidney Howard on Gone with the Wind. I would very much like to have him come out and do a script whenever he's available. I feel that he and Ben Hecht are probably the 2 best writers for pictures who are not lined up with studios, and they are both rare in that you don't have to cook up every situation for them and write half their dialogue for them.
Howard accepted the task of writing the script on condition that he could work 3,000 miles away from the Selznick studios at his farm in Massachusetts.
Sidney Howard was the best dramatist of that particular period. But it was a very, very difficult assignment. It took time. It really took time. And Mr. Selznick wasn't always the most patient man that one ever worked for. He would call me and say, "What is Sidney Howard doing?" And I say, "How would I know what Sidney Howard was doing? I wasn't sitting there."
Howard eventually delivered a 50-page treatment by Christmas 1936.
Dear Sidney, I feel that we should not attempt to correct seeming faults of construction. I've learned to avoid trying to improve on success, and I don't think any of us have ever tackled anything that is really comparable in the love that people have for it.
By now, the book was a runaway bestseller, and Margaret Mitchell was a celebrity.
Miss Mitchell, is Gable your rep butler?
I'm sure Scarlett O'Hara never suffered more during the siege of Atlanta than I have suffered during the siege that has been on since publication day.
Selznick sought Margaret Mitchell's participation to reassure himself and to impress the public. But she was always firm.
I wrote the book, and that is all. My connection with the motion picture ended when I signed the contract selling you the film rights. I sold them to you, lock, stock, and barrel. From that day forward, they have been yours to do with as you please.
Here's news for which you've been waiting. Names of the winners in our Scarlett O'Hara contest. First, here are the names of the 6 actresses who received the largest number of votes for the role. Betty Davis first, Katharine Hepburn second, Miriam Hopkins third, Margaret Sullivan fourth, Joan Crawford fifth, and Barbara Stanwyck sixth.
Casting the picture became a national obsession. Vogue magazine made a composite image of the ideal Scarlett from photos of the leading contenders. Letters poured in from the public. 121 actresses were recommended in these letters. Crazy suggestions, some of them, some intriguing. Zazu Pitts, Mae West, Clara Bow, Lucille Ball. There was even one gentleman from New Zealand who recommended Vivien Leigh.
Selznick hired Russell Birdwell from the Los Angeles Examiner, and Russell was a newspaper man who knew how to write a headline and pump up a story. And this became a frenzy and a mania. Who was going to be Scarlett O'Hara? He was responsible for a national search for Scarlett. And since every woman of any age and any young girl saw herself as Scarlett in those days, it was a pretty frantic search.
In November 1936, Kay Brown set out on the first of 3 long talent searches through the South.
The bells turned out in droves. For the most part, they were all healthy mothers who should have stayed in Baltimore. We are barricaded in our room, having arrived from Charleston. Dear David, I thought I did a bit of work in New York, but it's child's play to the madhouse through which we have just gone. On Friday, we held open auditions in Atlanta, and there were at least 500 people there. We saw every Miss Atlanta for 20 years back. How's you all, honey child? We're done in.
In the meantime, in Hollywood, many, many women of some stature also saw themselves as Scarlett, and the tests were made endlessly.
Tallulah Bankhead, a Southerner and sometime friend of Jock Whitney, was the first of the 32 actresses who did screen tests for the part.
What is it?
I love you. I'm in love with you, Ashley. I love you. I love you. I love you.
David Selznick was a publicity genius.
I love you.
He knew the search for Scarlett would be a grand entertainment and a way of keeping public interest alive in a film which as yet he had neither the money, the script, nor the nerve to make.
I'm in love with you, Ashley.
So if he couldn't find a Scarlett, what about Rhett? Selznick had tried to sell himself on Ronald Colman, Gary Cooper, Errol Flynn, but here the public was unanimous.
There was only one person who could play Rhett Butler. Everyone who read the book was convinced that it had to be Clark Gable.
Oh, you like my electrical personality, huh?
No, nothing as obvious as that. I think you have a very remarkable brain.
However, he was numero uno hot stuff on the Metro lot, their biggest box office star And they were not in the habit at Metro of lending their superior stock.
It was a profound embarrassment for Selznick, who could only get Gable by begging first and then paying through the nose. Yet he still clung to two hopes: that the movie could be made for $1.5 million, and that he could make it without any help from his father-in-law, Louis B. Mayer.
Must regretfully inform you that chances of getting Gable are practically nil, if not, in fact, actually non-existent.
Sidney Howard delivered his first draft of the script by the end of February 1937. It was the script for a 5.5-hour movie. It would have to be cut, and Howard reluctantly agreed to come out to Los Angeles for the revisions. He arrived on the 1st of April to discover that Selznick was entirely preoccupied by problems on The Prisoner of Zenda. On April the 14th, Howard wrote to his wife.
They asked me some days ago to write a ballroom love scene for the Zenda script, and I wrote one.
I'll dance with no one but you tonight, Lady.
And I dance only as my king commands.
Then your king commands.
Last night, Selznick said, "Could you let me see a rewrite on that ballroom scene?" "Sure," says I. "How do you want it rewritten?" "I don't know," says he. "I haven't read it yet."
And 2 weeks later, in another letter,
"This fellow Selznick was born with no sense of how to organize his time. His troubles with Zenda are still continuing unabated. He has not had time to read my script and has read the book only very hastily. In the 5 weeks that I have been here, I have pretty much wasted my time completely."
it was not until July that Selznick finally got down to work on the script with Howard and Cukor. By August the 5th, they had a new draft, 15 pages longer than the original. It dawned on Selznick that this was not one ordinary movie, but two giant ones put together. It called for long-term planning.
In 1937, DOS made a very important decision as far as making Gone with the Wind was concerned. He hired William Cameron Menzies as the production designer. Bill was an absolute genius.
We need a man of Menzies' talent and enormous experience on the sets of this picture and on its physical production. I hope to have it prepared almost down to the last camera angle before we start shooting, because really thorough preparation will save hundreds of thousands of dollars. What I want on this picture, and what has only been done a few times in picture history, is a complete script in sketch form.
The whole look of the picture was pretty well dictated by Bill Menzies' storyboards. The sets, the people, they made you absolutely feel what the finished picture was going to look like.
A grand old Hollywood rule was applied: film it on the backlot. The marvels of trick photography would stand in for the South. Indeed, Selznick never saw the South until the premiere of the picture. But Cukor and his team went there to meet Margaret Mitchell, to take photographs, to scout, and bring back the knowledge, the look, and the flavor to California. They hired Wilbur Kurtz, a Georgia historian and a friend of Margaret Mitchell. He set to work with Menzies and art director Lyle Wheeler on the design and construction of an Old South which would meet the demands of historical accuracy and Hollywood magic.
12 Oaks is pure fiction. Well, there never was such a place in Clayton County. However, the story writers demanded at least one glimpse of the traditional moonlight and magnolia atmosphere of the Old South. Hence, those gorgeous interiors and an atmosphere of opulence that would make a Clayton County farmer rub his eyes. As for Tara, they listened closely to my explanation of rural architecture in North Georgia, but since Tara was also on the fictional side, they indicated that the house should be warmed up a bit.
It was early in 1938. A whole year had passed since Sidney Howard had presented his first script. Selznick was finally ready to face the task of cutting it down. It was frustrating work, and as yet, not one principal part had been cast.
I seem to have made tests of everybody. I don't remember the people who didn't make tests. They were varied and different, and some were excelled in one scene and some in the other.
Quiet, space. All right now, a lot of tempo. Camera! You and
heralded me, Melly Wilkes, you made Ashley and the others and so. You know he wouldn't have gone home so soon if you hadn't have dragged him. Oh, I saw you.
This is one scene that never made it into the picture. Q-Corps was using it to test actresses for Melanie.
Balls of fire. So you would have insulted me like everybody else did.
Oh, Mercy, I didn't mean to hurt you.
Oh, Mercy, no, I didn't mean to hurt you. Why, you're my own sister.
Why,
You're my own sister. Go on down.
You're my own sister, darling. My own Charlie's widow, and I'm sorry you're hurt, my dear.
and I'm so sorry you're hurt, my dear.
No Melanie impressed in
But
these
I
tests.
can't meet Governor Bullock or any Republican or any scallywag.
But
I will
one
not meet
Scarlett
them in your
stayed
house
in
or any other
Selznick's
house,
mind.
not even...
Paulette Goddard.
Not even if I have to be rude.
Are you criticizing my friends?
Elsewhere in town, another actress had done a rather more extended test. It was a whole film.
Julie!
Jezebel. In March 1938, Warner Brothers completed their own Southern romance, starring one of the Scarlett favorites, Bette Davis. It wasn't the wind, maybe, but it was a respectable breeze, and it ruffled Selznick's hair.
Dear Jack, the picture throughout is permeated with characterizations, attitudes, and scenes, which unfortunately resemble Gone with the Wind.
Remember how the fever mist smells in the bottoms, rank and rotten. But you trust that too, because it's part of you, just as I'm part of you. And we'll never let you go.
Jack Warner replied immediately. He did thank David for his, quote, splendid interest, unquote. As of June the 4th, 1938, Selznick had spent nearly $400,000 on rights and writers, tests and preparation, and he still had no Scarlett, no Rhett, and no satisfactory script. Being one's own master was getting to be very expensive.
May 27th, to Jock Whitney. LB called me today to suggest that MGM would be interested in buying Gone with the Wind, together with my services as producer, on an outright purchase, with a substantial profit. It is to be considered that if the profit were substantial enough, I feel myself that the risk is slight. I dislike seeing our company not make the picture. Possibly it shouldn't make anything. I may seem to be arguing both ways. I am. If we make the picture, my hair will turn white. If we sell to Metro, my hair will merely turn gray.
Like his father before him, Selznick was a compulsive gambler. There's a nice Hollywood story about him playing roulette at the Clover Club. A friend comes up to him and says, "Look out, David, this wheel is rigged." "I know," says David, "but it's the only game in town."
You're an ace-high gambler. I'll give you a chance to get even if you want to.
This time, Selznick could not decide whether to take the big gamble, make the film himself, or sell it to MGM. He turned for help to Jock Whitney. David had a nickname for Jock, Strongheart. Time and again, it was Whitney who steadied his hand. And now Jock had the answer. Go for it. Why did we set up if we weren't ready to do it ourselves? A new round in the high-stakes game began. But Selznick still needed more money if he was to make the film himself. He needed a Rhett, and the public demanded Gable. So he began new negotiations with MGM. Warner Brothers came to the table. They offered Errol Flynn, Bette Davis, and a money deal that was sweeter than Metro's. But Bette Davis had had her Southern dance in Jezebel and won an Oscar for it. And Flynn, well, Flynn was a pale ghost of Gable.
It's Bennett. I'm on the yard.
In August 1938, the game came to a climax. MGM would loan Gable and provide half the budget, up to $1.25 million. In return, they got world distribution and half the profits on the picture for 7 years. It was the decisive moment. For once, Selznick won the hand. But MGM won too. Gone with the Wind was the difference between profit and loss in many of the lean years to come. Gable thought he was the loser. He didn't want to do the picture. It scared him, and he'd been traded like a prize bull.
Good night, sucker.
So Louis B. Mayer sweetened the deal for him. Gable wanted to divorce his wife, Rhea, so that he could marry Carole Lombard, the dazzling comic actress who might have played Scarlett herself if the film had been set on Park Avenue. Mayer agreed to a $50,000 bonus that would go to Gable's discarded wife. Later on, during the filming, Selznick would grant him a weekend off to marry Lombard. The Gable contract was signed on August the 24th. David Selznick now faced an alarming deadline. Shooting had to start in January 1939. He decided to take a vacation, a month in Bermuda, and a chance to finalize the script, which now consisted of 4 packing cases full of drafts. It was a daunting task, and again he sought the help of Sidney Howard.
Sidney said no, he wasn't going to go to Bermuda. Well, would he ride to Europe on the boat with him and do it on the boat? No, he wouldn't ride. He wouldn't go any place from his farm. He would ride on his farm.
So Selznick grabbed Joe Swirling, who'd just written Made for Each Other for him. Someone to argue with, someone to do the typing. But he left Bermuda, already demanding another writer.
Will require a dialogue writer for Wind, preferably starting my arrival in New York. Not interested Sidney Howard. Understand Oliver Garrett's play was terrible flop, so should be able to buy him cheaply.
Garrett was hired, and he and Selznick began substantially revising the script as they traveled back to Hollywood, where a favorite for Scarlett was finally emerging.
This is Jimmy Fiddler in Hollywood, California, where a good suntan hides many a slow burn. More than a year ago, I revealed that Paulette Goddard had made tests for the role of Scarlett O'Hara and that David O Selznick had signed her to contract. Today, an executive of the Selznick organization tipped me off that Miss Goddard is definitely set for the role, and official verification will be made within 2 weeks.
Oh, Ashley, I could make you so happy. Anyway, Melanie can't. Well, Dr. Fontaine says that Melanie can't give you any more babies, and I could give you...
To forget that day at 12.
Well, I can't forget it. Can you forget it? Can you honestly say you don't love me?
No, I don't love you.
It's a lie.
Even if it is a lie, do you think I could go off and leave Melanie and the baby? Break Melanie's heart? You couldn't leave your father and the girl.
Oh, I could leave them. I'm sick of them. I'm tired of them.
I know you're sick and tired. That's why you're talking this way. I'm going to help you. I won't always be so awkward.
There's only one way you can help me. Take me away. There's nothing to keep us here.
Nothing. Except honor.
I saw the Paulette Goddard Jeffrey Lynn test and thought there was an enormous improvement in her work. So much so that I think that she is still very strongly in the running as Scarlett. I was completely unimpressed by Jeffrey Lynn and think we should forget him as Ashley.
3 weeks ago, I reported that Paulette Goddard is the odds-on favorite for the role of Scarlett O'Hara. Second choice to Paulette is Katharine Hepburn, who's been in the race from the start.
All right, come on.
I think Hepburn has 2 strikes against her. First, the unquestionable and very widespread intense public dislike of her at the moment. And second, the fact that she has yet to demonstrate that she possesses the sex qualities, which are probably the most important of all the many requisites of Scarlett.
Are you there, Mr. Fane?
Is that you, Sylvester? Come in.
Oh, so you're really a girl.
All we have to do is line up a complete cast of such people as Hepburn and Leslie Howard, and we can have a lovely picture for release 8 years ago.
Betty Davis, Carol Lombard, Margaret Sullivan, and other candidates are now out of the running. Today, a dark horse loomed in the background when tests of Lana Turner, young MGM actress, are made on a closed set.
Can you honestly say you don't love me?
No, I don't love you.
That's a lie.
All right, even if it is a lie. Do you think I can run away and leave Melanie and the baby? Break Melanie's heart? Well, you couldn't leave your father
Oh,
and
I
the girl.
could leave them. I'm sick of them, tired of them.
I know you're sick and tired. That's why you're talking this way. But I'm going to help you. I won't always be so awkward.
There's only one way you can help me. Take me away. There's nothing to keep us here.
Nothing except honor.
I saw the Lana Turner-Melvin Douglas test. I think that Turner is completely inadequate. Too young to have a grasp of the part, apparently. I'm afraid we'll have to forget her. I think that Douglas gives the first intelligent reading of Ashley we've had.
Oh, my dear.
But I think he's entirely wrong in type, being much too beefy physically. It makes the Leslie Howard matter even more vital and pressing.
Oh, you love me. Say it, say it, say it. You love me.
I've looked at the Goddard test, the one she made with Jeffrey Lynn, practically daily since it arrived. And I must say that each time I see it, I am more and more impressed. As much work as possible should be done with her.
Selznick 5.
Quiet, speak.
Oh, Ashley, I was wondering where you were keeping yourself. And to think of just running into you like this.
You went for more gently, more quietly, more move.
Oh, Ashley, I've been wondering where you're keeping yourself.
And I think of just running into you like this. You know, it seems so long since we've had a good talk together. I don't know.
Once more, Paulette. Your face is so hard.
Is it?
We'll relax now.
Oh, Ashley. It seems such a long time since we've had a good talk together. I was wondering where you were keeping yourself. And to think of just running into you.
All right. And you want to show the back of the thing?
Yes.
You want to turn around? Now turn around.
Well, goodbye now.
Yeah,
Well, I never fainted in my life. Wouldn't do you no harm if you did faint. If you want to catch a husband, I'll catch a husband. You put on the dress. What's my honey gonna wear? That? No, you ain't. You ain't gonna show your bosom for 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I sure am gonna tell your ma.
Paulette Goddard was an actress whom Charlie Chaplin had fallen for and had starred in Modern Times. She was a personal favorite, a friend of Selznick, George Cukor, and Jock Whitney. She was a girl who laughed a lot. She lived right across the street from Selznick in Charlie Chaplin's house, and Hollywood assumed or hoped that she and Charlie were married. But if they weren't, could Paulette be Scarlett on screen and in life? You've seen the picture. You're at a great advantage. Imagine David Selznick's state of mind. After 2 years of hullabaloo and a nationwide search, who's he got for his Scarlett? His next-door neighbor. Could Paulette really carry the part? He's writing memos desperately trying to convince himself that she can. But what he needs is something that no memos and no amount of charm or money can get him. A miracle. Who is this girl? The product of an English convent school, born in India to a well-to-do English business family. Raised to a life of polite picnics and romping in the cold outdoors. Her name is Vivien Leigh. She's shy of the camera, but sometimes shyness is a mask for a fearful need to pretend. And by the time she's 21, she's a not very successful actress.
Oh, yes, the squire has arranged it all.
Oh, he has he?
Yes. You see, their property, the squire's, and the Armitage property join. And the squire has arranged the match so that the game won't stray. They've had such trouble.
Well, I'm blowed.
In 1935, she does make a big hit in a play called The Mask of Virtue. And when she reads Gone with the Wind the next year, she's convinced the part of Scarlett is for her. She feels so like Scarlett in her drive and the need to get her own way. She starts to work for the part, never realizing what a long shot she is. Charles Morrison, a Selznick scout, does recommend her in February 1937.
Miss Vivien Leigh, in quarters far over England, is as fine a prospect for stardom as any girl I've seen in a long while.
It is madness. Why should he risk his life twice?
Dearest, be quiet.
No, let her speak. You love her. It is fit that you should ask her leave.
I love her. But I will not ask any girl's leave to do what I must.
Not if I order it. Michael, speak to me out of your own heart, not because she bids you. Must you go? If you are killed, Michael, there will be so many years without you. I shall grow old. 50 years without you, Michael. Think of it. 50 springs, summers, winters. Must you go?
Selznick looked at a reel of Fire Over England and couldn't see the fire under the Elizabethan costume. She falls in love with Laurence Olivier, her co-star in Fire Over England, and leaves her husband and young daughter to move in with him. In 1938, Olivier goes to Hollywood to work for Sam Goldwyn. Vivien has a London agent, but secretly she signs with Olivier's American agent, too. None other than Myron Selznick. She has a picture taken in what she imagines is the most persuasive mood of Scarlett O'Hara, and sends the picture to America. But still, nothing happens.
No reply. There must be. Please ring again.
In the fall of 1938, she boards the Queen Mary and sets sail across the Atlantic. On the boat, she reads the book again and memorizes some of Scarlett's speeches. She's in New York by December the 1st, And then she takes a plane to California.
Vivien Leigh came to America probably with the thought of Scarlett O'Hara in the back of her mind because she had loved the book. But she really came because her lover Laurence Olivier was here doing Wuthering Heights, and she couldn't bear the separation. There was a tremendous attachment between the two, and they eventually married. So she arrived here to be with Laurence Olivier, and of course, looking for work at the same time, went to Myron Selznick. This was logical, especially if she wanted to meet David.
She presents herself to Myron Selznick. He looks and thinks, maybe. It would be a great joke and a very surprising gift for David. He asks Vivien,
would you like to go to a fire?
40 acres, the back lot at Selznick International, was crowded with sets from old pictures. King Kong, King of Kings, The Garden of Allah. The area had to be cleared to make room for set construction on Gone with the Wind. So Menzies and production manager Ray Clune had the idea of burning the old to make way for the new, and filming the fire as the burning of Atlanta in the picture. Special effects man Lee Zavitz devised an elaborate system of pipes pumping oil and water through the old sets so the blaze could be raised or lowered at will. Smoke machines were tested and cameras carefully choreographed in endless rehearsals. This was a scene on which there could be no retakes.
We finally got to shoot the burning of Atlanta on December 10th, 1938.
There were only 7 Technicolor cameras in existence at that time, and we used every one of them.
Quiet, please. Quiet on the set. Roll the cameras. Okay, Lee. Light the match.
Looks like the whole back lot's going up in flames. I don't know how many fire departments were represented there, but they were from Los Angeles, Culver City, Santa Monica. They all sent equipment there.
The telephone company is in for a bad 60 minutes. For the Los Angeles populace, seeing the splendid blaze and the light on the low-hanging clouds, call up to ask where the fire is. Many think it's MGM afire. Oh, this tickled Selznick immensely when he heard it.
I brought my own camera so that I could first photograph the first burn.
Those people who did their stuff in dumb show while the flames roared were stunt doubles. Rhett was understudied by a master of trick horsemanship. The young lady who fooled you into thinking she was Scarlett managed to writhe around in the intense heat and cover her face accordingly, for fear some sharp-eyed critic.
Myron Selznick was one of the visitors on the set, and it was during the fire that he went up to his brother and he said,
"Hey, genius, meet your Scarlett O'Hara."
And he introduced David to Vivien Leigh at that time. And I guess everything clicked.
There was this ravishingly beautiful girl. There's what about her? So my office was right there, and I had piles of scenes, and I gave her the various scenes. I don't think she'd ever heard anybody talk with a Southern accent. And she read it, and she read it very intelligently and very well, with a very clipped British voice.
The morning after the burning of Atlanta, while the ruins still smoldered, David Selznick wrote to his wife, who was in New York.
I was greatly exhilarated by the fire sequence. It was one of the biggest thrills I've had out of picture making. First, because of the scene itself, and second, because of the frightening but exciting knowledge that Gone with the Wind was finally in work. Myron rolled up with Larry Olivier and Vivien Leigh. She's the Scarlet Dark Horse and looks damn good. We're making final tests this week. It's narrowed down to Joan Bennett.
Oh, yes, you is. You's going to eat every mouthful of this. No, I'm not. No,
Jean Arthur, Paulette, and Vivien Leigh.
Now suck in. Now suck in. Suck in. keep your shawl on your shoulders.
Oh, creepers.
Keep your shawl on your shoulders. I ain't aiming for you to get all freckled after the buttermilk I done put on you all this winter, bleaching them freckles you got on the beach at Savannah. Oh, now, Miss Scarlett, come on and be good and eat just a little for Mammy. Come on, honey.
I'm going to have a good time today and do my eating at the barbecue.
I ain't aiming to have you to go for Mr. Wilkes and eat like a field hand and gobble like a hog.
Mother's a lady, and she always eats at parties.
When you get mad, you can eat too. Fiddle-dee-dee.
Mother's a lady and she always eats at parties.
When you get mad, you can eat too.
Ah, fiddle-dee-dee. Ashley Wilkes says he likes to see a girl with a healthy appetite. Oh, fiddle-dee-dee. Ashley Wilkes told me he liked to see a girl with a healthy appetite.
What gentlemen say and what they think is two different things.
Mother's a lady, and she always eats at parties.
When you get mad, you can eat too.
Fiddle-dee-dee. Ashley Wilkes told me he'd like to see a girl with a healthy appetite.
What gentleman says and what they think is two different things. And I ain't noticed Mr. Ashley asking for to marry you.
She was the perfect embodiment of this character we had been searching the world for. Anyone within viewing distance of this girl felt the fiery disposition in her. There was an alertness and an aliveness that we had not seen in anyone up to that time.
Well, why didn't you say it, you coward? You're afraid to marry me. You'd rather live with that stupid little fool who can't open her mouth except say yes, no, and raise a packet of mealy-mouthed brats just like her.
You mustn't say things like that about me.
I mustn't be damned to you. Who are you to tell me I mustn't? And you made me believe that you wanted to marry me.
That's not fair, Scarlett.
Oh, you did. It's true. It's true. I hate you till I die. I can't think of anything bad enough to tell you.
Vivien was told that she had the part on Christmas Day. January 1939. Filming must begin before the end of the month, and Gone with the Wind begins to take on a physical existence. Decisions on the other roles now became imperative. Selznick finally resigned himself to the idea that the English matinee idol, Leslie Howard, was the best available Ashley.
I want to see makeup color on Mr. Howard. We need to lessen age around the eyes.
He was 46 at the time, and extensive experiments with makeup and hair dye were necessary to make him look appropriately youthful.
Howard looks older than in the first test. Slick down his hair more and kill the lines under his eyes. Ashley may look a little older in the last half of the picture, but in the first scenes, he must look really young and romantic. Leslie's hairpiece is good, but make the sideburns heavier. Go stronger on the lower eyelashes.
Leslie Howard was as reluctant to take over the role in Gone with the Wind as Clark Gable had been. He said, if you put me in some of those Southern colonial costumes, he says, I'm going to look like the gay doorman up at Beverly Wilshire. He said, don't do it to me. I don't want this film. The only way Mr. Selznick could get him to play the part was to promise him something that had been his lifelong ambition, namely to be a producer. We were getting ready for Intermezzo with Ingrid Bergman. And so he went to him and he said, I've got this wonderful new Swedish star here. And if you really want to be a producer, you may be the producer if you play the part in Gone with the Wind. He never read the book. He never read the words of any other character in the film. He knew exactly what he was supposed to say, and period.
Oh, don't tease me now.
Olivia de Havilland had for some time been Selznick's first choice for Melanie. But she was under contract to Warner's, and they didn't like lending out their stars. It was only through her personal plea to Jack Warner's wife that she was released for the part. The three principals signed their contracts, and an announcement was made to the press on January the 13th, 1939.
Hedda Hopper's Hollywood.
Mr. Selznick was 2 years deciding on his Scarlett, and out of millions of American women, couldn't find one to suit him, which would seem to cast a reflection on every girl born here. I'm sure millions of Americans will stay away from the picture in a gesture of protest.
The millions failed to respond to Miss Hopper's outburst, and in the South, they said, better an English girl than a Yankee. Walter Plunkett had designed over 110 costumes for the 4 principal roles alone, plus scores more for the other parts. Now they were being fitted and tested in front of the Technicolor camera. Laura Hope Cruz was Aunt Pitty. There was a bunch of gorgeous Belle Wattlings before Ona Munson was chosen.
I'll bet the other ladies ain't grateful to me.
And Anne Rutherford and Evelyn Keyes were Scarlett's younger sisters.
I was so dazzled, and not since Birth of a Nation, I can't recall anything in my lifetime that swept throughout America and the world as this book did. No matter where you went, what city you were in, people were reading and weeping over this book.
The echoes of Birth of a Nation with its notorious Ku Klux Klan scenes were hardly reassuring to the black audience, and the black actors accepted their roles in a climate of disapproval.
There was a very, very difficult period with the black press. They had threatened a boycott of the film because they were afraid of Uncle Tomism and the depiction of the slave.
Under pressure, the word nigger was eliminated from the script, and Selznick deleted all references to the Klan. According to his own lights and the standards of the time, he did attempt to honor the black point of view.
Dear Jock, I have gone to extremes in the preparation and casting of the picture to avoid any derogatory representation of the Negroes as a race or as individuals, and to eliminate the major things in the story which were apparently found offensive by Negroes in the Margaret Mitchell book. I feel so keenly about what is happening to the Jews of the world that I cannot help but sympathize with the Negroes in their fears about material which they regard as insulting and damaging. Truth to tell, Selznick took rather more time and trouble on molding the look and sound of Vivien Leigh into his vision of Scarlett. Miss Leigh should report regularly at 9 or 9:30 each morning, work at least 2 hours on her accent, then report for fittings, then report for rehearsals with Mr. Cukor and for any photographic tests that may be necessary. I should like the photographic tests to include various experiments with ways of making up her eyebrows to make them look more natural and more in period, different makeups, and experiments with her figure, including particularly her bosom. Selznick, fearful of the social conventions of the time, also decided that Vivien and Olivier could not live together during the filming.
David wanted his Scarlett to be the perfect little virgin Southern belle, and nothing should tarnish her character. So he put 24-hour guard service around the house so that no one would come near her to try and take pictures of maybe Larry coming in or coming out.
On January the 21st, Clark Gable arrived for his tests.
I am informed by MGM that Clark Gable refuses under any circumstances to have any kind of a Southern accent.
Well, Clark Gable was adamant about never again doing a costume picture. He had made Parnell, and it was a terrible failure. He was embarrassed always by it.
The reason I didn't want to do Gone with the Wind, here is a novel that is the top seller of all time. Now, people form opinions about characters, and they formed the opinion that I was the one to play it. They already had a preconceived idea of what they were going to see. Now, that's why I didn't want to play it. I said, too many people know this character. But my guy with the Red Butler, if they saw one thing that they didn't like, they would have remembered back to the book. I had to be on my toes, and I do that.
Between these two people, there seemed to be a cool friendliness. Gable knew that this was a woman's picture, and he treated her with the utmost respect.
Agitated. Ma says if you put the knife under the bed, it cuts the paint in two. But Mr. Selznick, who was on the set that day, wanted it red. Ma says if you put the knife under the bed, it cuts the paint in two. They had two different versions.
After the first 10 days of shooting, we only had 23 minutes of film, and 10 of those had to be reshot.
It wasn't working. After more than 2 years preparing the picture together, Cukor and Selznick could not agree. They were battling over the script, and Cukor's pacing was too slow, too Southern, perhaps, In prospect, the movie grew longer, and Gable was uneasy, not sure his Rhett was cock of the walk. Selznick foresaw the big epic scenes to come and knew he would need a Sherman, not a master gardener. Southern dialogue coach Susan Myrick wrote to Margaret Mitchell.
George finally told me all about it. For days, he told me, he has looked at the rushes and felt he was failing. He knew he was a good director and knew the actors were good ones. But the thing did not click as it should. Gradually, he became more and more convinced that the script was the trouble. So George just told David that he would not work any longer if the script was not better, and he wanted the Howard script back. David told George he was a director, not an author, and he, David, was the producer and the judge of what is a good script. And George said he was a director, and a damn good one, and would not let his name go out over a lousy picture. And if they did not go back to the Howard script, he, George, was through. And bullheaded David said, okay, get out.
Cukor quits as Gone with the Wind director.
As a result of a series of disagreements between us over many of the individual scenes of Gone with the Wind, we have mutually decided that the only solution is to have a new director selected at as early a date as practicable.
There was a big break in our professional relationship. I was removed from the picture, and you thought that would have broken our friendship. Not at all. We remain enormously good friends, so that's a tribute to, I should think, both of us.
Vivien Leigh wrote home saying, he was my last hope of ever enjoying the picture.
Vivien adored George Cukor, and she was very upset when he was taken off the picture. She would often go to visit him on Sunday afternoons. She felt insecure, I think, about losing him, and they would discuss private little things with each other about the picture, her new director, and about how the scene was being played.
Victor Fleming was one of MGM's top directors. He was Gable's buddy, director of Red Dust and Test Pilot.
This is high enough. What more do you want? I want dirty. I said dirty. I'm sick of this.
In early 1939, Fleming was directing one of Metro's major projects, The Wizard of Oz. But he was Selznick's first choice to replace Cukor. And Louis B. Mayer, a very fierce lion, came to the rescue with magnificent speed. Fleming was taken off Oz before it was finished, and he reported at Selznick International on February the 17th.
Because of the wonderful things he does.
And when Mr. Fleming finished reading the few pages of script that had been shot so far, he turned to David Selznick and he said, Mr. Selznick, you haven't got any bleeping script.
Gone with the Wind was shut down for 17 days. The stages stood empty at a carrying cost of over $10,000 a day. Selznick's Folly, the cynics were calling it by now. While Hollywood mocked, Fleming and Selznick got to work on the script. This time, Ben Hecht was called in for the rewrites.
7 o'clock in the morning, Mr. Selznick and Victor Fleming arrived, and they said I had to go with them. I was now going to write Gone with the Wind. So David told me the whole story, which I couldn't follow. It seemed to me to be what we used to call in Chicago as long as a whore's dream, as pointless. So in order to save time, Vic and David decided they would act out the characters for me and explain them. David took the part of Scarlett O'Hara, and Vic, he took the part of Butler and somebody else. But it began at 7 o'clock every morning, kept up till 2 in the morning.
Hecht eventually got Selznick to dig up Sidney Howard's original treatment, pronounced it superb, and used it as the basis for his rewrite.
Now, they had worked day and night getting this thing done. Selznick on Benzodrine, Hecht on sheer energy, and at the end of 2 weeks, Ben Hecht was a wreck. David Selznick was still popping the pills and still full of vim and vigor and anxiety. And he begged him to stay for another week to finish up what he thought was needed. Hecht not only didn't stay, he ran, he hid, he got on a train, and he went back to Nyack and he wouldn't answer the telephone.
On March the 2nd, filming resumed under Vic Fleming. The advantages of a newcomer: no backlog of arguments, a lot of fresh energy, and a certain disregard for the niceties. With the help of Menzies' storyboards, he was going to get it done, so long as Selznick could tell him clearly, face to face, without those damn memos, what he wanted.
I just sort of snapped to attention whenever I saw Victor Fleming. He had marvelous command. He was head of the table wherever he was. He was the father image. He would brook no nonsense, and we respected him deeply and liked him and tried to be very obedient to anything he wished us to do.
I thought he was a bastard. I found him obnoxious in many ways, but I certainly could recognize his talent. He was a very, very strong macho man, which is what Gable was looking for. He did not like Mr. Selznick. I think he did not like almost everybody in the world except Clark Gable and himself. But he did something. He revitalized the whole theme of Gone with the Wind. Suddenly things began to happen, and the girls didn't realize that they're crying for George Cukor, but what's happening is that the film has spirit and tempo. He was a very, very fine director, even though I personally couldn't stand the language that he used on the set, the way he treated Vivien Leigh. He was very harsh with her. I don't wonder that she cried for George, because George was a very sympathetic and passive person with her. He allowed her to be what she felt the role should be, but Fleming didn't. Fleming demanded of her that she be the bitch that she was described as.
Marcella, please talk to Mr. Fleming, who I discovered to my pleasure feels even more keenly about the breastwork situation than I do. I have pestered poor Vivien so much about this. Please explain to Victor that I would rather he become the sole heavy from now on.
This was the new regime. Make Scarlett into Gable's kind of gal. Make the action cruder if necessary, but keep it moving. Except Selznick still wasn't happy with what he saw in the projection room.
March 3rd. 2 or 3 of the sequences are much too dark. I cannot drive into people's heads that when I ask for effects photography, I do not mean that the whole scene should be so dark that we cannot tell what is going on. If we can't get the artistry and clarity, let's forget about the artistry.
Just 9 days after filming restarted, the cameraman Lee Garms was fired. Garms was an artist among cameramen, a man with a personal style. Selznick thought his work was too subdued. He was not capturing the richness of color that Menzies had designed. Ernest Haller was brought in to replace him. Ironically, he had shot Jezebel and worked well with Technicolor's mandatory cameraman Ray Renahan. Now Selznick turned his attention to other departments, maintaining a blitz of objections and instructions in all those memos.
March 9th. I realize how much we have been kidding ourselves and feeling that we could get really effective stuff off the back lot. Gerald and Scarlett's walk makes Tara look on screen as though it were the backyard of a suburban house. It is my feeling that before we get through, we're going to have to go out on location and retake this sequence. March 11th. Our sets always look exactly what they are. Sets that have been put up a few hours before, instead of seeming, in their aging and their dressing, to be rooms that have been lived in. April 3rd. I spoke today to Walter Plunkett about Gable's costumes. I think there is no excuse for their fitting him so badly, especially around the collar. April 17th. The clothes that I have been complaining about in the past are masterpieces of tailoring compared to the horrible outfits that I saw tried on him Saturday. A more ill-fitting and unbecoming group of suits I have never seen on a laboring man, much less on a star.
Typical Selznick. Nothing like a few words of praise to hold the team together. One thing was certain. The picture was going way over budget, and it was anyone's guess what the final cost might be. There was only enough money to see the company through another 3 weeks, and MGM declined to put up 1 cent more than originally promised. Jock Whitney was unsuccessful in trying to persuade the East Coast partners to come to the rescue, so Jock and his sister put up another $1 million, plus a personal guarantee to secure a further loan of $1.25 million from A.P. Giannini of Bank of America. It was money to finish Wind and Intermezzo, as well as produce the forthcoming Rebecca.
Takes 4 shots of something a day to keep him going, and another shot or so to fix him so he can sleep after the day's stimulants. Selznick is bent double with permanent, and I should think chronic, indigestion. Half the staff look, talk, and behave as though they were on the verge of breakdowns.
I have for some time been worried that Fleming would not be able to finish the picture. He's so near the breaking point, both physically and mentally, from sheer exhaustion, that it would be a miracle, in my opinion, if he's able to shoot for another 7 or 8 weeks.
Fleming walked off the picture. As I understand, he and Vivien Leigh didn't see eye to eye, and there was a big altercation, and he just walked off.
Director Fleming ill, steps out of Gone with the Wind production.
When Fleming walked off the picture on April 29th, the official version was that he had suffered a nervous breakdown.
I think myself that his nervous breakdown over a period of 2 weeks in which he disappeared was simply a punishment for David Selznick. He was disturbed by the fact that Selznick would take over filming. He was on the set a great deal more than he had ever been on any film. He had a great deal to say about the performances. He was giving instructions. He was doing everything wrong. You can't do that to a director who's as competent as Fleming was.
Gone with the Wind had lost another director, but there was no panic this time. The film had momentum. Selznick's desperation was the true directing force. And MGM had another replacement on hand, Sam Wood, who had just finished Goodbye, Mr. Chips. The script changed every day, but the actors knew their roles by now, and Selznick kept urging the untidy mess on. After all, there is a point in any picture when everyone yearns only to get the damn thing finished. After 2 weeks, Fleming came back. Recovered, maybe, or perhaps alerted to the fact that Wood was doing a very capable job.
I have had a long talk with Vic about speeding up on the rest of the picture. And he, as always, expressed himself as willing to do anything and everything. Quite apart from the cost factor, everyone's nerves are getting on the ragged edge, and God only knows what will happen if we don't get this damn thing finished.
So Sam Wood stayed on, and the work was divided between 2 units. Fleming faced up to the biggest shot of the picture, the revelation of the South's defeat in a huge panorama of Confederate casualties.
Prepared for that, I guess a year in advance. They laid about a half a block of concrete, and there was no camera cranes that could lift us as high as they wanted to go. So they got a big construction crane that would lift us 80 feet in the air.
They got the crane from the Long Beach shipyards, and the reason for the runway was concrete 2 feet thick. They had to build it because of the weight of the crane.
We put out a call for several thousand extras the day that we did the shot. But the Screen Extras Guild had a lot of large calls for that day, and they only could deliver, I think 400 or 500, and we had to use dummies.
I was one of the several hundred extras who were hired to do this big production number. They told me to go out in the set and fill in an empty spot. So I came over here and lay down, and pretty soon, prop man came over and put a dummy alongside of me. And then an assistant director came over and he told me to reach underneath him. Feel that rod underneath there? I said, yeah. He said, well, move that rod, and when you do...
I don't think that the same picture could have been made today for under 150 or maybe 200 days.
The damn thing finally came to an end. The principals invited one and all to a wrap party, but in truth, this was only an opportunity for a few drinks and photographs. Later, the same night, they started retakes.
As it was shot, we were cutting all the time. So it was probably 10 days after the last shot that we were ready to run the entire picture.
Oh, no, leave me alone. Don't.
Well, we spent many an hour in this projection room trying to eliminate footage.
Don't.
It was a demented process. It wasn't just knowing where all the pieces of the film were, but having an accurate continuity on paper, and that didn't exist, because there had never been a final script. After all the rewrites, it only existed in Selznick's head. Finally, in his cutting room, Selznick was supreme. Here, with no writer or director to annoy or confuse him, he could vacillate to his heart's content. The hope was to premiere the picture in November. Today, the work would take at least a year under the best of circumstances, and they were trying to do it in 4 months. There was one session of 50 hours with Selznick and Hal Kern, the only ones left awake.
The last few months of Gone with the Wind, I worked 23 hours a day. In fact, once I went down to the doctor because I didn't have the drive that I should have. And the doctor put me on the table and he said, "My God, man, you're dead." And he got David on the phone and gave him hell.
Not only did they have to cut a 20,000-foot picture out of nearly 500,000 feet of film, but Jack Cosgrove's department had to complete all the process shots, and there were hundreds in the picture.
Jack Cosgrove told David Selznick that we could make the whole picture right here at the studio using trick shots or matte shots, what we call special effects photography.
Terror was built on the back lot, but there were no trees in back of it, just Culver City and some other standing sets. The first small image is the part of the scene we want to see. The part of the shot we wanted to replace is blocked out. Then Jack painted the rest on glass and rephotographed the two together. Jack Cosgrove invented new techniques as we went along. When we'd come to some impossible situation, Jack would find a way to bail us out. The exterior of the Atlanta mansion was a painting.
Great Jehoshaphat. Great Jehoshaphat.
Horsey, we sure is rich now.
Huh.
When it is removed, you can see it was really shot in front of the studio. 12 Oaks was never constructed either. The long shot was a painting, but Jack never had time to perfect the shot. The carriages passed through the shadows without any shade falling on them.
On September the 1st, 1939, the Nazi army smashed into Poland.
World War II has begun.
There seemed to be no disturbance of the atmosphere in that studio. I think we knew what Hitler was, and I think we knew what some of the consequences could be. But this was a world apart from the whole universe.
The exhausted company was still recovering from the tragic news of the death of Sidney Howard in a tractor accident on his farm. But there was barely time to grieve. The pressure was on to get the next cut ready for preview.
Mr. Selznick wanted to have a preview without the press knowing about it. He wanted to get an actual audience reaction with no press aware. So Mr. Kern told him, the only way to do that is to let me make all the arrangements, because if you know about it, you'll tell everybody.
On September the 9th, Hal Kern told Selznick the time had come, and they left the studio with 54 cans of film and soundtrack. It was a searingly hot afternoon, and they drove for over 2 hours out of Los Angeles. With them were Jim Newcomb, Jock Whitney, and Irene Selznick. Eventually, the car pulled up at the Fox Theater in Riverside. They were showing Beau Geste with Gary Cooper, so there was sure to be a good crowd inside.
Mr. Selznick waited outside on the pavement and sent for the manager, who obviously jumped to the right conclusion, very clearly promising anything.
You know, there's something in the air here that makes me...
You too? Oh, that's just how it affects me. And sometimes I wish some big, strong man would just grab me and run off with me.
Mother and I came to the theater that night because it was so very hot outside. The theater was air-cooled. I came mainly because I wanted to see Beau Geste. We're watching Hawaiian Nights.
gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please?
The house lights came on. A man went on the stage and announced that we were now going to see a major studio preview.
Of an important new film.
What's the picture?
What?
Who's in it?
I'm sorry, I can't tell you what it is, but I can tell you it's a little long, folks, so if any of you want to call home, please do, because from this moment on, the doors will be locked and nobody new will be allowed into the theater.
We were anxious to see how it was going to go. Was it really as great as we thought it was?
To be the judge, not the critics and not the reporters.
The final titles were not yet made and the music wasn't written, so Hal Kern had laid in music tracks from The Prisoner of Zenda.
When Margaret Mitchell's name came on the screen, you never heard such a song in your life. And when Gone with the Wind came on the screen, this was just thunderous. They just yelled and they stood up on the seats. I had that music wide open and you couldn't hear a thing. Mrs. Selznick was crying like a baby and so was David. And so was I. Oh, what a thrill.
When Gone with the Wind finished playing, you could hear a pin drop. The audience was just stunned. That's when I turned to my mother and said, "Now can we see Beau Geste?"
I don't seem to be able to find any fault with the picture.
I believe that it is the best picture that ever was or will be produced.
A long picture, if good, is well worth seeing. Leave it long, but cut everything else. News, shorts, everything. Gone with the Wind is happily stuck to the book.
I'd like to say that I think Vivien Leigh is one of the most super colossally great actresses I've ever seen.
Don't cut the picture, cut everything else off the program.
I want to thank you for allowing we folk in Riverside the privilege of seeing it first.
Every adult man and woman should be required to see it and pay close attention.
3 years ago, when David O Selznick prepared to make Gone with the Wind, he promised it would be the finest movie ever produced.
After 3 years, Selznick's job is done. Those who've seen Gone with the Wind agree it's one of the greatest motion pictures ever produced. Now, the reason I'm citing the greatness of this movie is to prove in the next breath that its cost, $3 million, is far too much to spend on one motion picture. In order to get back its prohibitive cost, Gone with the Wind would have to show in every city and town in the world. It's a cinch to show a huge financial loss and should be conclusive evidence that it's folly to gamble $2 and $3 million on a single picture.
Despite the success of the preview, Selznick was still improving the film and even adding to it. Vivien Leigh was called back to America for retakes. Her mother shot this fragment of her, working on the 5th and final version of the opening scene. It was only a month away from the preview date, and now there was a new panic.
The music was, in Mr. Selznick's opinion, one of the principal stars of the picture. But he made a mistake in not preparing it sooner. He wanted Max Steiner, and I think we had to wait for him. It was a frenzied, last-minute attempt to get the pictures, 3 hours of music.
Steiner has again told us he cannot meet the date. The reason we're continuing with him is because of my belief that his work will be a great deal better than it sounded on a few pieces.
Fearful that Steiner might not make it, Selznick engaged 2 other composers to back him up, Franz Waxman and Herbert Stothert.
Stothert had a few drinks on Saturday night, apparently, and did a lot of loose talking about how he was going to have to fix up Max's work. Within 10 minutes, it was back to Max, and he was in a rage. Max really went to town, and the result is that by tomorrow, we will have considerably more than half the picture scored.
Wheel 48 coming up.
Here we go.
108 at 6:35, intermission.
Max Steiner was a Selznick veteran. He'd done Bird of Paradise, King Kong, and The Garden of Allah for him. He had also scored Jezebel for Warner's, so he came to the task well-versed in Southern folk music. He blended a lot of it into the wind. The Atlanta premiere had been put back to December the 15th. But Hal Kern had to virtually tear the film out of Selznick's hands to get it to the labs.
December 11th, 1939. To K. Brown. I've just finished Gone with the Wind. God bless us, one and all.
Atlanta was very excited that they had been chosen to be the place that Gone with the Wind was seen for the first time. It was poor. It was still a provincial town. And I think that Gone with the Wind gave the South, and gave Atlanta in particular, pride that it hadn't had for a long time. It kept struggling. The Melanies of the world struggled to keep their pride, but Gone with the Wind did it for her.
Gala days in Dixie. Southern hospitality is at a fever pitch as distinguished visitors headed by producer David Selznick and screen stars Olivia de Havilland and Vivien Leigh arrive in 2 chartered airplanes.
No wonder.
Yes, it's the Clark Gables just in from the coast. Charming Carol Lombard and friend husband get a mighty welcome. After dark, all Atlanta turned out for the big parade that starts 3 exciting days of celebration.
Here we were put in the open tonneau of a convertible and driven down the main street, and it was dancing in the streets. There were balloons, there were banners.
It wasn't just the people from Atlanta. They had come from far and wide. I have a newspaper of the day. The entire newspaper is Gone with the Wind. Nothing else happened in the entire world that day.
I present to you the man who, by national acclaim, from start to finish, was, is, and always Rhett Butler, who now owns Atlanta, Mr. Clark Gable. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You know, as I started down here this evening, your mayor told me that the population of Atlanta was 300,000. I have seen myself tonight coming from the airport 3 million people.
I've spent quite a good deal of my time on Peachtree Street this year, and now that I'm here, it feels, well, just as if I were coming home. I just feel that if I never have another exciting day as long as I live, I shan't mind because I've had this day. You're all wonderful people, and I'm very, very proud of my own hometown. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have entered Atlanta with humility and trepidation. We remain in gratitude. And it's our fervent hope that this city of all cities will be pleased with our efforts. Thank you.
The flower of the South assembles at the Junior League Ball, social highlight of the festivities.
The South was the subject of Gone with the Wind. It meant everything to them. They had lived through this, and it was still suffering from the Civil War itself. And they felt very possessive about this picture. I mean, David may have thought it was his, but Atlanta didn't think so. They knew it was theirs, and they knew it was going to be a success, too.
A replica of O'Hara's home Terra takes the spotlight as 2,000 privileged guests attend the actual premiere. Atlanta's few remaining boys in gray are guests of honor. It's certainly a night of nights for Miss Leigh, the English girl who captured Dixie with her beau, Laurence Olivier. They just can't get enough of the Gables, and Clark is his usual modest self.
This is Margaret Mitchell's night and the people of Atlanta's night. Allow me, please, to see Gone with the Wind as a spectator. Thank you.
Diminutive Margaret Mitchell, the author who rarely appears in public, attends to see her brain trial and is excited beyond words.
This is a very happy and
exciting day for me. And at this time, I want to thank everybody in Atlanta for being so nice to me and my poor Scarlett. Thank you.
Mr. David O Selznick. 3 years of effort have led to this moment. If Atlanta, which is the final judge, approves our efforts, these labors will not have been in vain.
David Selznick got a telegram that night from George Cukor. I don't know whether to be wistful, noble, or comic, but I really send you all my love tonight.
This picture was a great emotional experience to me. I think it was heartbreaking, and I know I'm not the only person that's got a dripping wet handkerchief. But I want to speak just a minute about Mr. David Selznick. He's the man that every one of you all cracked that joke about. Oh, well, we'll wait till Shirley Temple grows up and she'll play Scarlett. I want to commend Mr. Selznick's courage and his obstinacy and his determination in just keeping his mouth shut till he got the exact cast he wanted in spite of everything everybody says. And I think you're going to agree with me, he had the absolutely perfect cast.
Christmas of 1939 was a blur. Premieres in New York and in Hollywood, one party after another. It was the night of January 29th, 1940, Oscar night at the Coconut Grove in the Ambassador Hotel. It was really the last great party for the movie. It was a smash hit by then. The awards were the top-up.
And now let's get right to it. The awards of 1939. First, the technical awards.
To William Cameron Menzies for his outstanding use of color in Gone with the Wind. To Hal Kern and James Newcomb for film editing, Gone with the Wind. Color cinematography to Ernest Haller and Ray Renahan, Gone with the Wind. To Lyle Wheeler for art direction, Gone with the Wind.
Really, I think this is a wonderful thing, a benefit like this for David Selznick, and I want to tell you...
And famed author Sinclair Lewis announces the Oscar for the best screen adaptation.
Gone with the Wind, the screenplay by Sidney Howard.
For Best Direction of 1939, Mervyn LeRoy presents the award to Victor Fleming.
I cannot accept this without paying tribute to those really responsible for much of the picture's success. The crew behind the camera, to whom I am deeply grateful.
For the Best Actress is presented by Spencer Tracy.
Need I say it is a privilege and an honor to announce this winner, Miss Vivien Leigh in Gone.
Ladies and gentlemen, please forgive me if my words are inadequate in thanking you for your very great kindness. If I were to mention all those who have shown me such wonderful generosity through Gone with the Wind, I should have to entertain you with an oration as long as Gone with the Wind itself. So, if I may, I should like to devote my thanks on this occasion to that composite figure of energy, courage, and very great kindness, in whom all points of Gone with the Wind meet, Mr. David Selznick.
And David Selznick received 2 Oscars that night. The Irving Thalberg Award for Consistent Achievement, and another for Best Picture. The film of the occasion does not preserve what he said, perhaps because he intended to do a rewrite, but never found the time. No picture had won as many Oscars. No picture has ever done as well at the box office. All over the world, including its major re-releases, Selznick's Folly has earned in today's dollars about $840 million. That means it has taken in over $2 billion in ticket sales and has had by far the largest audience of any film ever made. There has never been such glory in Hollywood, and there may never be another success like it. Gone with the Wind is the pinnacle in that great passion, frenzy, art, and business we call the movies.
Years later,
Selznick talked of the dilemma to which his greatest success had condemned him. He'd hit the jackpot, and from then on, no matter what films he made, they would always be compared and judged inferior to Gone with the Wind. By 1944, David Selznick had gambled and lost too often. Poor business judgment caused him to sell off his interest in Gone with the Wind, and if he always carried something of the exhaustion of 1939, he never stopped being that enthusiastic, arrogant, crazy dreamer, full of ideas and hopes. Legends do pass their prime, but that never alters the legend for the rest of us. In 1961, David Selznick, Vivien Leigh, and Olivia de Havilland went to Atlanta again. It was the centenary of the Civil War. They were happy and sad in Atlanta. They could not fail to see how they had aged while the film stayed fresh. They were the last survivors. Leslie Howard had been lost in 1943 in a plane crash while on a secret mission for the British government. Margaret Mitchell, who never wrote another book, died in 1949, hit by a car while crossing a street in Atlanta. Clark Gable had a fatal heart attack in 1960, just as he was finishing The Misfits. David Selznick would die in 1965, and Vivien Leigh 2 years later. And the film? Is it a great film? Critics judge greatness in movies as if they might be art, whereas Gone with the Wind knew it was a great show. But it did not cheat the readers of the book. And it is a movie driven by two very